So I'm happy to welcome Acevail to FOMO. When I first was getting the title of the show together, I always naturally, as someone in the US, go to United States words, American words, English words, but also French words. My first thought was extraordinaire, but I thought, well, wait a minute, Acevail is German, so we need to have some word that is in German that natively describes him. So you got to pronounce this one for us, Acevail, because I'm going to butcher it if I try.
Bemerkenswert.
And the er, that's the suffix that means pertaining to the next set of words. Is that kind of how that goes?
That is correct. It is a reference to the developer, and so that's why that suffix is there.
And if people aren't familiar, the logo that you've got, this is not the MetaMask logo, but this is rather the avatar that you've got on your GitHub profile. So if people are looking you up on X, they would see something different. But I pulled the logo from GitHub because I want to talk about developer stuff. So I figured, we'll get your GitHub profile. Where did the fox come from?
I built an application like almost 10 years ago, which was a portfolio application for cryptocurrencies where you could like drop in your API keys and it would figure out what you own across your exchanges. And I called that Foxfolio for some reason, and my brother made that logo for me. And then I basically stopped working on the portfolio thing, but the logo stuck.
Well, I love it, but it's not MetaMask. So
it's not MetaMask, no. And I've heard that multiple times that people mistake that or at least refer it to MetaMask.
So the most recent project that you've worked on is something akin to a Bloomberg terminal, and I've got it on the screen. The first thing that really struck out to me in looking at this was it looks so much like Apple stocks, which is not a bad thing. I'm not trying to neg it. I'm not saying you ripped off it, but rather that I was reminded of a book that has inspired a lot of things that I've done in application design and visual design. And I wasn't sure if you'd ever heard of it, but this is the book. It's the Visual Display of Quantitative Information by Tufte. I fell in love with this book from the first second that I ever got wind of it. And I think he's the first one that ever came up with the idea of a spark line, which I think is what you've got right here, this little graphic that shows the tiny little trend plot of the price over 7 days.
Yeah, that's correct. I have not heard about that book before, and I'm very curious to dive into that.
Yes, you should definitely check out this book.
But you're right. The terminal, the plan for the terminal was to. I actually just saw somebody else use AI to create a Bloomberg terminal style overview over different stock prices in their case. And since I'm tinkering a lot with different AI agents at the moment, I wondered how would a terminal like that look like, but instead display the Chia asset tokens. And as a result, that was basically what the AI came up with. There were a bunch of tweaks left and right, but that's the original aesthetic was basically Claude coming up with something that looks like a Bloomberg terminal. And then I fed in a bunch of data from Dexy, and that's the result basically.
So that's one other project that you actually did some work on was xchprice.info, and that's mostly pulling data from Dexy. Is that right?
Not just Dexy. So xchprice.info is as it says, it's a price info page where you can compare different DEXs and also swap services. And look at the different prices that you would get if you buy or sell a certain position size. Because when you look at those numbers, you'll see that depending on how much you want to buy or sell, the slippage, so the amount that you will lose compared to the normative price, is actually quite different depending on which exchange you look like. And so the main reason why I built that is because the market maker was starting to add liquidity to DEXI. And with that, DEXI was suddenly a very interesting place to get XCH at. And before that, I was pointing people to Aerodrome for quite a while now, just because, well, it's also DEX, but it's on base, and the liquidity is not super great at the moment. And to see the difference between those exchanges and how much you would get if you, for example, buy $1,000 worth of XCH, that's basically what the page does. So you see that for buying 1,000 USDC worth of XCH, you should go to DEXI because that's where you get the best price.
That slippage number onto BetSwap is kind of eye-popping.
Yeah, that was actually I didn't add to that swap initially just because I knew that there's not a lot of liquidity there, and it looks bad. But then there was the idea to add it despite that, just to show people, hey, if you would add liquidity there, it might actually be used more. And with that, the liquidity providers would earn more fees and profit as well. So it looks like there needs to be some mechanism to incentivize adding liquidity to BetSwap, and is currently not the case. So that's why the slippage is not looking great.
And as far as the pricing, so you're aggregating from these three different sources, and then that's what we see in the cat terminal is sort of a synthesis of all of those sources of price.
The cat terminal is actually only DEXI data. So if you look at that page, that's only pulled from DEXI, although DEXI also has all the Tibet swap orders as part of their API data. And so it basically shows everything that happens on chain. I'm currently working on some actual on-chain parsing solution where you can where you would go through the individual blocks and look at the actual offer puzzle on chain to see to extract the transactions, because right now it only shows transactions that happened via that DEXI knows about, basically. So if you haven't uploaded the offer to DEXI, then it wouldn't show up in here. But it would show up on chain because all the things that get traded via offers show up on chain as an offer. So for sake of completeness, that's where you should ideally look as a source of truth, of course.
Absolutely. That is the gold standard, of course, because if something is traded via an offer file, then that puzzle shows up in a block and you can just parse all the blocks, and then that shows you exactly everything that has occurred in the past. But DEXI's got stuff that might happen in the future too, right? So it's sort of giving you an idea of where pricing might go.
That is correct, although my plan for that would be to tap directly into Splash, so that while looking at the chain for things that happened in the past, looking at the Splash for things that might happen in the future, or to look at the order book, basically, that's probably the ideal source for that. DEXI just has the advantage to provide very nice APIs, and it makes it very easy to build front ends like this that don't need a lot of extra computation on top.
So do you have a pretty strong relationship with DEXI? I know that one of the developers there, I think his name is Dennis, right? I think he came to at least one meetup. I remember seeing a presentation that he did at one point.
We met in London at XCH London. That's correct. So we go back. We didn't know each other before Chia, and we just happened to start talking because, well, he was building Dexy with a bunch of other people, and I was building MintGarden, and we kind of had an overlap regarding NFT trading, and so we were involved in the initial NFT standard launch by Chia, and just kept talking since then. And yeah, so we actually have a bunch of integrations between MintGarden and Dexy, where offers get moved to each other, or where Dexy uses MintGarden as verification for NFT profiles, for example. So yeah, we're just good friends in the ecosystem, I'd say.
So, and something, speaking of meetups, you've got one coming up in April that's happening in Berlin. Is there any update on that? Is it the date is set and people are starting to register, or what's going on with your meetup? Is it still going to happen?
It will happen. The date is most likely gonna be the 13th of April, which is a Sunday evening. And there will be an official meetup page and registration very soon. CNI is gonna set it up, and starting with that, people can register and meet us in Berlin, which I'm very curious about how many people will show up, especially since it's just in quotes a unofficial thing, no talks or official schedule, just food and drinks basically. But Gene is gonna be there because he's having a trip to Europe anyway, so might as well join us for the meetup. I'll be there, and Dennis is probably also gonna be there, as well as and some other people from the Berlin Chia community. So it's most likely gonna be a lot of fun.
So if there's people listening and they want to meet the developers and the people behind MintGarden and Dexy, this is going to be the place to be. I don't know. It could be pretty cool. It could be pretty fun, I think.
Yeah, it is pretty close to Chia Toronto, and so I'm not expecting people that will go to Toronto to fly into Berlin as well, just because, well, you're gonna meet all the people in Toronto anyway. Might as well just go there. But people that are in the close enough and are have the time to come over to Berlin, or maybe are living in Berlin, for those, it's gonna be a very nice, definitely smaller sized meetup compared to what's going to happen in Toronto.
I know that the one that we did in LA when we did the Evergreen meetup, that it was just kind of unofficial. It was, hey, just come hang out. We didn't have speakers either, but it ended up being a blast, and it was one of my favorite meetup events that I have ever had a chance to do, and I met so many people in the community. So I'm sure it'll be a blast, and regardless, there will be many people who are close in the area that will likely stop by, because Chia Toronto is far away from where this would be.
Yeah, it's correct. There's a lot of people that are very involved in the ecosystem that will come to Toronto, but there's probably a lot of people that aren't very involved that just don't want to invest the time and money that they would have to invest to go to Toronto. So for them, this is like the ideal alternative.
So you mentioned that you used Claude for doing the development of some of this, and I know that you played with Cursor in the past as well. Curious about what you've found using AI to enhance your productivity or to help you with development. Do you feel it's a substantial productivity gain? Do you still use it pretty much ubiquitously when you develop, or is it just an experiment? You try it and then you go back to coding the way you were prior to AI?
So I've had different experiences. I was at a point where I realized that if I end up in an editor that is not AI uh, supported, I'll just start typing a line of code and then just stop in the middle of it because I expect the editor to finish it. And then I sit there and wait 10, 15 seconds until I realize that this editor doesn't have AI support and will not complete the line for me. So what I'm using most is just those autocomplete features that Cursor offers, where it just
And
guesses.
that feels like something we've had for a long time. I mean, I've been developing for, something 20 odd years. And I remember when we first started having IDEs that would autocomplete, it would give you some little drop down or you could tab to autocomplete. That does feel like a substantive productivity gain, bar none, to just say, I think this is what you're trying to do. Let me save you a bunch of typing. Here's 20 lines of code that are likely what you're about to start doing.
Yeah, and it's not just the one line completion, but it's also I complete this line and then I see this thing that you did is probably something that you will want to do 10 lines later as well. So I just gonna jump there and do it as well. And then I jump to the next place and do it as well. And then jump to the next place and do it as well. So you have things that are way more aware of the context and things that you might want to do compared to what you usually had in an IDE. And I've programmed a lot in JetBrains developer environments, which have very extensive autocomplete and code awareness compared to like dumber editors like VS Code. So I was using tools like that a lot in the past, and they have very powerful concepts of how to understand the code and what you might want to do. But Cursor, by now, just it has so much more awareness, and there's a lot of times that I just say, well, there's a bunch of code, like 10 lines of code, and I just want to do it something differently. And yes, I could, or just refactor it in a way that I know that it's better. But instead of doing it myself, I just select the 10 lines of code and say refactor it in that other way, and then it just does it. And I think it's a very, very powerful tool for somebody who has years and years of developer experience, because you know what you want, you know exactly what you want. And if you could just do it yourself, or you just say, give me what I want, and then the IDE does it for you. And as long as it does the right thing most of the time, it is a time saver. And then, of course, there's a bunch of things around um, drafting ideas or concepts or architectures for new systems or technologies that you might not be totally aware of if they are well known. On the other hand, things like Chia, Chialisp, CoinSet model, forget it. You have no chance to use AI for that. It's just not possible.
There's
It
not
will
enough
just
there's not enough training data.
no, it will just dream up things that are just wrong in some nuanced way, and you will struggle very hard to find out why it is wrong.
And that is the thing that has held me back from using AI, and some of the work that I've been doing is it's just there's not enough of a body of work that it is helpful for that. So it does hallucinate things and give us stuff that we just end up having to spend time jettisoning. So yeah, I've definitely encountered that one working
Yeah,
on.
I do a lot of contracting work for CNI at the moment and helping them build the cloud wallet, and that's a project where AI is just useless. It's a very large code base with very much Chia stuff, and AI will just not understand what's going on. So you can just not use it there.
Okay, I missed that. I didn't realize that you started contracting for CNI. Has that been going on for a while? Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
It was a side thing since last year, and now that Permuto came up, they asked me to invest a little bit more time and help them get this thing out of the door. So you might have seen the chip that I've created, the revocable CAD one, which was basically a result of me working for CNI and integrating the things that Permuto need into the cloud wallet. And the other thing was the new Vault implementation that Rigidity just added to the Chia Wallet SDK, which is basically a very powerful vault that supports multi-sig and different keys, key types, and all that. And that was my construction site for the last few weeks to get that into Cloud Wallet.
Okay, perfect. That led into the thing that I wanted to start asking you about, which was how much have you been working with the Wallet SDK? This seems like in some of the projects that you've done, especially MintGarden, you're using Chia agent and some other stuff. Or how much have you been working with the Wallet SDK, and how have you found it so far? Do you intend to switch over any of your projects to using some of the new Node.js stuff that just recently got published?
So the backend of MintGarden is actually written in Python, just because back when I started that project, that was what the Chia blockchain code base was written in, and that allowed me to borrow or integrate a lot of the code that Chia blockchain was using for NFTs into my backend, and use that for parsing and all that. So that's why this is in Python, and there are a bunch of places where I would love to use the new Chia Wallet SDK, just because the Rust implementation is just so much faster, especially if you look at puzzles and try to unravel them, to uncurry them. And the new bindings that Rigidity created, they are they also have Python bindings, and it's probably going to be something that I'm going to look into. Um, Generally speaking, my Rust is not very developed, and so I'm struggling to be very productive when using Rust directly. So I definitely look forward to use those bindings instead.
Um, I was looking through your Secure the Mint project. So I wonder if we could take a turn to that for a second. There is a substantive amount of Chialisp in there. Did you write all that Chialisp? And if
Yes.
so, what was your experience getting into the guts of Chialisp?
Chialisp is a pain until it clicks, and then it's just so straightforward. There's still a bunch of things that I wouldn't touch. For example, optimization, performance optimizations, where you can just like bit shift things around and end up with way more efficient code. Um, but on the other hand, just simple puzzles like the Secure the Mint launcher, which builds an NFT in Chialisp, and it looks very scary, but it basically just curries things. Um, those are things that I have a lot of fun playing with or tinkering with, and my experience is that if you combine it with unit tests, then writing Chialisp is actually pretty decent. There could be a more developer support, like easier ways to look into what puzzles are doing and where they are currently stuck. For example, the error messages are still very obscure, and you kind of start remembering what exactly generate a runtime error means, but it would be something that could be improved from a developer experience standpoint, to just have more accessible debugging or development tools. But
Speaking of that, that's something that we've been thick in the weeds on the project that I've been working on over the last year and a half. I personally do not write Chialisp. It is it's like it has never fully clicked for me, even though Lisp is like a language that I'm somewhat familiar with. But man, for whatever reason, it just never really resonated with me as a developer, and I always found that I had other things to work on. But within the scope of the project, the people that are working on GeoLisp, they have been deep in the weeds of writing extremely complex Chialisp, and some of the tooling that we've had to develop to even make that process possible, and the amount of refinement and us going kind of round and round on writing drivers, writing Chialisp, even having access to the low level compiler, the debugger, being able to put our own statements in to be able to get error messages out. It's been a big process, and I think that there's some stuff that we could probably publish or contribute back at some point to help the community, because it's been pretty substantive effort, and I think probably Sebastian Trepka has probably got some internal tooling that he ought to release, because the stuff that he's been doing for Circuit DAO is pretty complex, and I can't imagine that they haven't developed internal tooling as well.
Yeah, and those are the dimensions of Chialisp complexity that I would also not touch at the moment. I'm mostly working on the driver level, where you have to puzzles together in a way that it ends up being a construct that you want to use. For example, the new vaults, they use like 10 different puzzles nested into each other and have replaceable parts depending on whether you want to use a multisig or whether you want to use a recovery time lock, and whether you want to use a passkey or a BLS key. So there's a bunch of complexity there, and that's where I'm pretty confident in. But developing the actual Chialisp is, I understand what the code does, but I wouldn't come up with the concepts yet. That's what Yak is good at, for example.
It's a special kind of wizardry for sure. Do you work with Yak quite a bit? Do you have frequent interactions with him at a developer level?
Yeah, we just like take an interest in what each other is building, but no common project at the moment.
Yak's not working at CNI, is he?
No, he's not.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, like I said, sometimes you just hear about things and then all of a sudden you're surprised. So, I mean, it can't hurt to ask. I'm curious about XCH Pay Me. Did you is there any movement in that? I know that it's still on a wait list. Is that sort of been sidelined as you're working with CNI and doing things for the cloud wallet?
So that's actually just a website. It is being used in production by a few projects. So for example, MintGarden uses it itself when you pay for MintGarden Premium. That's going through that. MonkeySue, if you want to buy something in the MonkeySue store and want to pay with XCH, that's what it's going to use. But there's actually some development in the background, because the project uses BTC Pay Server in the background, and they recently did a very big rewrite of their architecture and their plugin architecture specifically, which allows me to provide an actual plugin that you can just go and install in any BTC Pay Server that just adds Chia support to your instance. And that's very different to what I've been using in the past, which was basically a fork of BTC Pay Server that adds the Chia support into the low level code of it. So it was not very portable and not very easy to use and maintain. But that's going to change pretty soon, and then that's also going to be open source. So anybody who can and does run a BTC Pay server can just click one button and then add Chia support for that.
As far as wallets go, what's your current favorite? Are you using Sage?
I'm using Sage, yes.
Yeah.
Sage is just better in all the aspects compared to other things. I guess on mobile, it's just no, even on mobile, it's best. There's a bunch of things that I'm using Gobi for, just because I have it connected to things in browsers, and connecting Sage via Wall Connect is just not as smooth as using Gobi in the browser, which is not the fault of Sage. It's the fault of it's hard for a desktop wallet to connect to a browser. And I'm imagining that there might be a better solution for that, be it an in-app browser, or I'm not sure what the best solution is there. But for anything else, especially if you just want to take offers, create offers, manage your NFTs, send them around, that's all Sage for me.
I was actually going to ask you about Gobi. Gobi was very much the darling of the ecosystem for quite some time, but I don't hear as much about it anymore. Do you know if it's still being actively developed, or is it just like it hit a place where it was developed enough and it just didn't really need any updates?
So as far as I can see, they have been pausing development for quite a while now, just because, well, Chia, there was not a lot of there's no money to be made for a wallet in the Chia ecosystem, and the focus very much left the ecosystem a while ago. So I understand why some projects just stopped extensively working on things in the ecosystem. Pocket is the same basically, but now there are some signs that those developers are coming back. Like for example, Pocket Icer was starting to add some new things to his development toolkit, MIXEH, and Gobi was around at least for support, for example, in the Discord if people had problems. And so what made me use Gobi a lot was the fact that I could sign arbitrary spends with Gobi. So I can, on MintGarden, I can build a custom spend, which would, for example, mint an NFT using the secure the mint mechanism, or do some fancy other things that are not implemented in the reference wallet of Chia. And I can just go build that transaction myself and then just say, tell Gobi, please do that. Please submit that, please sign it, and then submit it. And Gobi has the interface for that. So you can do whatever you want. Whereas with the Chia reference wallet, you can only do what the interface allows you to do, which is like predefined things like transfer NFT, create offer, things like that. So it restricts the freedom of the developer a bit.
So one other thing that you worked on was Mojo Feed. What's going on with Mojo Feed?
Not much. So the idea of Mojo Feed was to what if we just built a Twitter clone, but instead of storing the messages on a database, we just store them in the Chia blockchain in memo fields, which was a fun experiment, especially around the time where some people stopped looking into or looked for alternatives to Twitter, like when Warpcast, also the Farcaster ecosystem, was growing, and also Blue Sky. I was just playing around with things and wondered what it would look like if we built a microblogging platform on top of the Chia blockchain, which, like, it is the most decentralized, most persistent way of storing things, safe from maybe the Bitcoin blockchain, but that's about as decentralized and secure as it gets. And yeah, so that's why I decided to build that. And due to other things keeping me busy, I'm not very active in developing it at the moment.
So it was kind of an experiment, something you wanted to try to see if it could work, and just other things came up, not that there was something fundamentally missing. Do you think that this will be a project that you come back to, or is this one likely it went as far as you wanted it to, and it's for somebody else to pick it up and run with it if there's interest?
So one problem that I ran into was file upload or anything that is not text. Right now, it just parses links that you put in, but there's no way of uploading an image, for example. And the main problem for that was that I wasn't sure where to store it. I didn't want to store it on my server because then it would be like going against everything that this website tries to do, which is a very decentralized, very secure way of microblogging. My vision would have been to use something like data layer and the dig network to store it in some kind of decentralized way, but that project is not at the place where I could use it for this, and therefore this is something that has to be solved before this could be moved forward. Also, I guess the change with Permuto and the Chia stuff keeping me busy, yeah, made me change priorities there.
How much did you look into the dig network? You said it wasn't ready, or it wasn't quite what you needed for this. Is it just because when you happen to have a chance to take a look at it or consider it? It just wasn't quite developed enough to build on top of, and it just needed some more time to cook.
So I looked into it and I chatted with Michael quite a bit. The main problem is a strong word. The main thing that it was missing was a store where I wouldn't have to store my own data to be able to write to it. So what I would like to have is that each user has their own store in the DIG network, but the users don't have to store them themselves, but they basically pay people in the network, which you don't have to know about. They just say, store my data, network, store my data. And then you put some exchange in, and then the network decides, well, there's a bounty, so I'm gonna go and store that data. And then you would still have your public key and your private key, and with that you could authorize changes to your data. So you are the one that controls which data goes into your store, but you are not storing the data yourself, but the network is doing that autonomously without you having to control that.
Kind of like how IPFS works, but maybe there's a way to actually have some kind of a payment around it, because that's essentially my experience with IPFS. Is it works in a way kind of like you're describing, and I always had hoped that whatever got developed for DIG network or decentralized data layer, that it would have sort of that feel of IPFS, but then that there would be this more of a decentralized storage. And I always really, really wanted that to be the direction that we took the Evergreen platform, because it was like you just
Mhm.
have this little box and you would just add a workload, and then you'd say, okay, I'm willing to dump a few plots, and then I've got some extra storage, and that's just for storing things on the network. And that I thought would be just like a slam dunk way to do that.
Yeah, IPFS is kind of useless if you have to pin it by using some centralized service. So you're paying Pinata to host the data in a decentralized network. It's kind of very uh, far from what you actually want to achieve. And so if you have had a network that you just scream into the void, please go host my stuff. I don't care who, and as long as somebody does it. And yeah, that's what I'd love to see. And I don't think there is a solution for that in IPFS either.
There definitely is not. It's exactly what you're saying. If you've ever looked at IPFS and you look at what pinning means, it's essentially the antithesis of everything that you're trying to accomplish when you're trying to put the data into IPFS. So this is an unsolved problem in my mind. It's not been solved by DIG yet. And it seems like Michael may be sufficiently distracted with his new gig that might not see a lot there for a while.
Yeah, let's see what's gonna happen there. It feels like it's something like a passion project for him. So hopefully he's gonna come back to that or drive that in parallel.
Well, we're almost to the top of the hour. Lucas, did you have anything you wanted to jump in? Any questions that came up in your mind of all the discussions that Acevail and I have been having about stuff in the Chia ecosystem and development?
No, I've been enjoying the depth of your conversation. Acel, I didn't realize that you had so many projects. So when you said, or when Grant said, typed, whoever, what was it? Bemerkenswerter? Bemerkenswerter? I think that might cover it. Bravo for everything that you're working on. It's impressive.
Thank you. And I think we touched half of it.
Just half? Wow, we're gonna have to have you back to hear about the other half.
Well,
Well,
as a last question, I guess, what is upcoming for Cloud Wallet? Since you're working on it, and I know that you're not supposed to say what things are happening, but is there like a next release that you're looking for in Q2 or Q3? Like when should we expect to see the next version of Cloud Wallet that showcases some of the stuff that you've done for the project?
So Dan actually posted a message today or yesterday, depending on where you are in the world, that we're gonna upgrade the cloud wallet to use the new Vault puzzle next Monday. And since that is a breaking change, we're gonna delete all the vaults for one last time, and rolling out this very, very new update supporting multi-sig and a lot of other cool things. And with that, it's basically vaults in with all their might. Not everything, but like 80% there. And I guess the next step is to have it on mainnet sometime in the future. And that's what it's going to be exciting for my part at least.
Well, and I love the UI in MintGarden. So is it that you're getting to drive some of the UI decisions, or is there somebody you're working with? I know that Seth used to be the UI designer at Chia, and he's not doing that stuff actively anymore. Is there somebody internally that's kind of calling the shots and saying this is how it should look and feel, or is this all coming from Acevail?
No, that's not me. So I'm back end, deeply in the back end, just because there are a lot of people that know how to build websites. There are not a lot of people that know how to build things in Chia, and so that's where I'm currently focusing on.
Well, so who's working on the front end and UI stuff? Who's on that side?
So there are a bunch of people working in CNI that have been there a long time, but not very public people. There's actually a lot of people working at CNI that are not very known in the ecosystem, and there's also contractors that help with that, but not involved in that.
Right on. Well, thanks for coming on, FOMO. This was a blast. Really enjoyed having you on the show, and yeah, we'll hope to see everybody on the next episode of FOMO.
Thank you for having me. Great that you do the show.